This is a Step Beyond the Fire podcast. My name is Cully. I'm a land manager and a wildlife biologist here in my home state of Florida. I invite you to join me on a journey as I seek to document the little-known stories told by those who use fire for the benefit of the land, also known as prescribed fire. So come on, let's head into the field and meet the people where the flame ends and new life begins. Welcome back to another episode of A Step Beyond the Fire. This is your host, Cully Lord. This morning, I'd like to introduce a gentleman named Rick Lint to the show. Rick has spent the past 33 years working for the U.S. Forest Service, having had many diverse experiences in fire, wildlife, and natural resources along his path. His career has risen along the ladder of opportunity from his beginning role as a wildlife biologist in the field to his current role as the Deputy Regional Forester for the Southern Region, which encompasses 13 states as well as Puerto Rico. One of his main focuses at this phase in his career is to help strike a balance between resource development and protecting wild places for recreation and wildlife on the 14 national forests and the 2 special units that he oversees. Welcome to the show, Rick.
Yeah, thank you, Cully. Good to be here.
Again, it's a great honor to have you here. So the first question I wanted to get into, you're responsible for managing some of the greatest public places our country has to offer. You manage places like Cherokee National Forest, to the Daniel Boone, to the Francis Marion. There's a lot of really amazing places that you're responsible for. Can you help us understand a little bit about your current day-to-day work on that leadership platform that you currently have?
Yeah, well, I think thinking about all the jobs that I've held throughout my career, my current job shares that same trait I've had, and I think every job is it's hard to predict what I'll be working on any day. Every day I go in with a general plan of what I might want to get done. But then with anything that can happen on a national forest across the region, you never know what's gonna happen. I like that variety. So my job has a lot of variety. Things come up. There's fires, storms, needs, and I've worked my whole career in the southern region. I didn't plan it that way. It just worked out that way. The next interesting thing to do was always somewhere nearby. But I really like the active management philosophy of, what are the needs of the habitat? What are the needs on the forest? And then we, do things to meet those needs. And then for part of my job as a deputy regional forester, there's three deputy regional foresters. I've got the natural resources portfolio, and then I work alongside Sherry Reeves, who has the operations portfolio, Ed Hunter, who has state and private and tribal forestry, and as well as the fire and aviation management. So day to day, it's for a deputy, it's what does the regional forester need to take some of the load off of his plate. Whatever the boss needs is a lot of our jobs, and interacting with directors that we have in our regional office, as well as the forest supervisors. And then each of the deputies, we split up kind of the lead for the day-to-day operations on forest. I've got 6 of the national forest directly in my portfolio, although the natural resource programs kind of gets me involved in a little bit or a lot of everything. And
is it fair to say that while you might not be putting out fires in a literal sense, you're putting fires out in a metaphorical sense more these days?
Yeah, it's definitely more of the upstream work. And I never really planned too far ahead. If you would have told me even 3 years ago that I'd be in this role, I would have said, no. It just so something would come up and it looked interesting, and something where I thought I could help. So yeah, a lot of the say figuratively speaking fires, but I think a lot of my role or our role is how can we help maybe clear obstacles out of people's way, help support people, help get people what they need so they can go put out those fires and do the prescribed burning and do all the work they need of helping take care of all the things that have to happen behind the scenes, and then helping what we can do to help with employees so they are freed up from other maybe administrative things that would otherwise come down to them that we can help them with. So when I say a lot of meetings, it sounds like like official boardroom type stuff. I say a lot of meetings. It's really somebody calls, they've got something they've got going on, they want to think it through with you. They've got an issue that just came up, and you're trying to work through it, trying to find some solutions for either people needs or something came up and we need to shift funding around. Working a lot with partners. We do a lot of work with partners. And if you think about the way the forests in the East are, they're all bought back private land from the Weeks Act, 1920s, primarily 1930s. And so we've always kind of been an inholding in amongst a lot of private land. And there's a lot of interaction with our state counterparts, tribal interest, other federal agencies, and at the local level, a lot of involvement with county officials, a lot of work with neighbors and partners. And so everything we're working on with the 13 some million acres of national forest lands in the Southeast, working with all those partners, plus we got a close relationship with Forest Service Research. You just imagine, the types of things that can come up day to day. And I said a lot of times I don't know what I'm working on each day because stuff comes up, but the calendar is always full. I get to work with some fantastic people. And then in this role, too, you get involved in national teams that are put together for different efforts. And then something I've done for years now is I'm also involved as a mentor in the National Mentoring Program. And then I'm a leadership coach we've got leadership programs in the Forest Service, and I've done that for more than a decade now.
It sounds like a really diverse opportunities, and I'm sure the unique issues that come up from day to day are as diverse as the different ecosystem types that you're working in. The little bit of experience I've had on the administrative level is similar to what you're saying, is that each day you never know what's going to happen. There could be, a wildfire breaks out on some area that, you need to divert resources and go straight, and help them. Or maybe there's a personnel issue here and you have to work directly with that person or the leadership team involved with them. Or the administrative side of the thing is like, I never realized how much goes into that. But a good administrator knows that that's their role, is to take off the burden, like you said, from the field staff of having to do those administrative tasks, because the world we live in nowadays is just, we just can't get away from it. Somebody has to do it. So I always, when I was in that role, I took pride in the fact that, okay, we're taking this load off of the staff so they can go out and get their jobs done and be more effective in the field.
That's what today, before this call here with you, Cully, at 8:30, I already had texting with a forest supervisor that's got law enforcement needs. I talked to another forest supervisor that has a fire going on. He was updating me on what they were doing there. Another conversation about a road issue on one of the national forests. And then just overnight, 20 or so messages rolled in.
Wow.
of things going on. And later today, we talking with our other Region 9 to the north about a tribal meeting with tribes that we put together and with the tribes every year, and working on hiring later in the day, hiring of forest supervisors and deputy forest supervisors across the whole Forest Service. And that's just a couple of things that are on the calendar for today, and some stuff that's already come up this morning.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. So as you might have guessed, shifting gears a little bit, we like to talk about fire a lot on this show.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background with fire and restoration work?
Yeah, my involvement with fire started right away. As soon as I got hired, there was a strong message. I was hired as a forestry tech, later became a biologist trainee. But from day one, I think I'd stopped by the ranger station before I started work, just to check in, say hi, make sure I knew the way there after moving to Alabama. And nobody was around. They were all out in the field. One person was there, and he said, "Hey, you're starting next week. Let me go ahead and get your fire gear, because you're going to need to be involved in fire and prescribed burning." And then day one, they said, "We're going to get you trained up. You got to get step tested." Because back then we didn't have full-time fire positions. Everybody just did everything. And it was a strong message. And back then we did the step test. You had to step on a step and off, on, off, on, off. We didn't do the pack test that we do now. Yeah, that came later. So back in the olden days. But I was in wildfire, firefighter, and then moved up squad boss, assistant crew boss, crew rep, and then and strike team leader, and then in prescribed burning was of course out there burning, and then advanced to firing boss and burn boss, and then after I knew enough to be dangerous, of learning a lot from other people, I went down to the Conecuh National Forest in Lower Alabama, and that's where we were just starting to learn about the growing season burning, and worked there with some great folks. And we pretty much within a couple of years took what they said, well, this is about the most we can do with burning. We just started looking at things differently and the needs, and before long we had doubled that burning program. Went over to Louisiana as a district ranger on the Calcasieu Ranger District, just west of Alexandria. And, the same thing, folks, like that, we can only burn 38,000 acres a year. I remember them saying that. It's all we can do. It's like a 4-minute mile. We can't beat it. And within a couple of years, we were up to like 62,000 acres.
Wow. What would you say was one of the contributing factors to that? I'm just curious. Was it taking advantage, like doing multiple burns in one day, or was it more getting more staff involved, or what was one of the things you guys were doing?
But both of those things, Cully, and a little bit more. Some of it was taking off some perceived limits. We can only start after a certain time. Well, why can't we start earlier? We've got to go plow that unit. We have to plow that unit out. Why don't we let it burn to the road or to the creek? And when some of that habitat on the Vernon unit, it was, really grassy understory, longleaf, a lot of history of the Vernon, a lot of history of burning there. And the National Guard and Army does operations there. So there's a lot of ignitions that would happen from small arms ranges, things like that. So it was, as far as the fuel loading and the fuel type is grass. So depending on the fuel, you could go bigger. As we moved to areas that had less fire history, more understory brush, that they would get smaller, because one, you'd have to ease into it, and then you'd have to worry about the residual smoke with the 10-hour and 100-hour fuels and that more brushy stuff. So where we could, we go bigger, but multiple burns in a day, just like you said, taking some of those perceived self limits off of us, And then a real basic concept that was, it seems really complex about burning and how you do burning and all these factors and parameters and rules and regs. But I tell folks, it comes down to three things you really got to keep your eye on. Is what's your average acres per burn? How many burns per day do you got? And how many days per year are you burning? And you multiply those three things together and you cancel out the terms, that's your acres per year. So if you can make a change in any one of those three things or all of them. So if you increase your average size of burns by 10%, say your average burn is 500 acres, you take that up to 550. Say you're doing one burn a day, you take that up to, add 10%. That's 1 out of every 10 burns, you do 2 in a day. And days per year, what if you find 10% more days? You're burning 15 days a year. You find another day or two you can burn. You just increased your burn program by 33% by doing that.
Simple math adds up pretty quick, huh?
If you do a little bit over than 25% increase, you double your burn program. If you increase by 0.26 on your acres per day, burns per day, and days per year, you will double your burn program. And it doesn't have to, it's because 1.26 to the third equals 2. That's what it is, right? But a lot of people that, we get lost in I think, can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing of there's so much information, but if you can keep your eye on those three things, you can affect change in your program. And where you got good, you can start to expand the good. You use those rules of fragmentation against the fragmentation that's occurred. So if you can get some good habitat, you increase the surface area of that each time you burn, and you can start to have some patchy burns because you're burning more frequently. You can really affect change on a larger landscape with that.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about having such a large acreage. Can be a daunting task for any one individual. And I know you guys work on. It sounds like you had a great team atmosphere that was able to handle those kinds of things and wrestle with those discussions and making decisions in the field. And that sounds like a really, really interesting project to have been involved in. And, thanks for sharing that for us. And, so you talked about this a little bit already, but I thought it would be a good opportunity for you to talk a little bit about how some of these diverse opportunities that you had during your career with the U.S. Forest Service and how, you were able to realize those along the way. It sounds like there was a lot of unique places that you were able to work in your career path. I think people would really like to hear about what that was like and some of the unique areas that you were able to work in.
Well, just to sum it up, it's been a blast. It's been a lot of learning. It's exciting. Get to work with some fantastic people, both inside the Forest Service and outside the Forest Service. The one thing I've noticed is, folks, the care and the passion that people have that drives them every day. One, the employees are, doing the work. The people that we hear from the public, sometimes don't like seeing active management. But the thing that we share in common is the caring for the resource, the caring for the land. Sure. And I think, boy, no matter what, we've got a lot in common already. But I started in Alabama as a forestry tech, became a biologist trainee on the Shoal Creek of the Talladega, and then went down to the Conecuh in Lower Alabama. I was there for about 7.5 years. And there, what was unique about that work was the biologists there had the timber program. And I'm not a forester. My background is wildlife biologist. But I had a lot of good people in support. But they had just done that. I was the third person in that role because they didn't have funding to have two. So they said, well, we need both. We'll get one. And that I learned a lot there. I was there for about 7.5 years. It was the second longest place I've been. Great bunch of people, fantastic forest, and learned a lot about what's possible and to try things and working with partners. And went over to Louisiana as a ranger. Went down to, I was in Central Florida on the Ocala as a district ranger. And there, as far as variety, all the natural resource things. But while I was there, really worked on trying to make it where there's a lot of make it where there's a lot less damage going on, and there was a lot of say urban crime issues in that area.
Ocala, you're talking about?
Yeah, and
yeah,
that was, I got there in 2005, and our centennial. There's been 100 years in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And my drive there, our drive, and I had a lot of support. We had fantastic people and worked with a lot of people, but the drive was, by the time we celebrate our centennial, we're going to honor all those that had come before us and have the Ocala in much better shape. And we did a lot of changes, top to bottom, front to back, to make it where people felt a little safer and secure there when they came. And I know it's always going to have issues. You've got millions of people within an hour drive, and but wanted to make it where people, they sit up a little straighter when you come on public land and national forest that's shared with everybody else. But yeah, a lot of diverse opportunities. One thing I didn't know about the Forest Service when I got hired, and I was doing orientation, they're bringing people in. I didn't think about it. I thought, well, they have foresters, and they're obviously hire ologists like biologists and soil scientists and things like that. But as far as diverse opportunities for people, is people who work, in accounting and public affairs, engineers, people who do project management, human resources, all those things. I had never even thought about it. I just thought about the people I'd see in the woods. But lots of diverse opportunities for people. But yeah, as far as variety, is my first year, I'm getting dropped off on a mountaintop from a Black Hawk helicopter to go fight fire in California.
Wow.
And later on, I'm wearing hip waders, collecting dusky gopher frog eggs in an ephemeral pond, trying to increase their population, climbing the side of a tree, putting in woodpecker inserts. Then, going to meetings and symposium, just one end of the spectrum to another, and working on all kinds of issues. Anything, if you've got land, anything you can think of that can come up is, what you get to work with. But say a lot of learning and being part of a bigger effort, and being part of some really great teams, and as far as meeting people and learning about people, it's been a fantastic ride.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah, a lot of unique natural resource issues and plenty of challenges along the way. And I thought this might be a good opportunity to ask you, what's one major challenge that you are currently working on these days to overcome?
I think, in the background, there's this broader, as far as there's a broad, say, thing going on that influences our day-to-day work, and that's what it's been happening. And we work with research on it's a forest futures project, and so this idea of the forecasted loss of up to 23 million acres of forested land in the South by 2060 due to urbanization. And
sure,
so that urbanization, wildland urban interface, it's day to day. If we get a fire, we've got houses nearby. If
sure.
and we saw, there's a lot of people that come to national forest, and in our more urban settings, more demands on the forest, more impacts that can happen on national forest. But that over the next 30, 20, 30, 50 years, our actions to maintain forest growth, ecosystem resilience, and that's a resilience to disturbance. It's fire-driven, storm-driven disturbance makes our ecosystems resilient. Just like exercise makes your body more resilient. Those disturbance regimes are real analogous to that. And then that increase in urbanization and those land use shifts and things that could happen just as a result of the climate changing, all those things combined, concerns about water issues, water stream flow. So we're doing a lot of work now for aquatic organism passages, trying to make sure our road infrastructure is resilient, which is difficult. But we have to prioritize that. But places we've got water quality issues and frequent storms, we've been trying to. So things we're doing now are all related to that bigger issue, and we're seeing periodic. We have mortality from insects and disease and fire. That's part of that prediction is expected. Those issues expected to more than double as the forests age. And I mentioned this is all bought private land. A lot of the forest was planted back in the 1930s, and it's getting older and older. And just like us, as we get older, we're more prone to pathogens and aches and pains and things like that.
Sure.
So one of the things we worked on at a broad scale is working with a lot of partners on Keeping Forests, which is a group of partners that share these concerns and working to conserve forests. And that idea of, through partners in our state and private arm of the Forest Service and working with folks like the NRCS is supporting private landowners, showing them why land matters, and that idea of active land management being important for the health of the forest. And, what it comes down to is if it's not economically viable to be in forest, and say private land, it won't be. It'll turn into something else. And a lot of people don't get that relation. And mention, our forests are kind of discrete work, chunks of land throughout the region, but our ecosystems don't start at the boundary. So again, like I mentioned, we work a lot with partners on how can we provide forested land, the benefits that come from that, and for wildlife, water, air, all those things across a larger landscape, working with partners and states, tribal interests. And that influences our day-to-day work because we're working on a lot of different things. And one thing we've done is we've grouped our forest to work kind of like in smaller teams. So we've got 4 main teams across the region. So rather than 16 forest supervisors all trying to vie and compete for what they think is a scarce source of funds and people, by teaming them up, we're able to look at things differently and work on larger projects together. And that we've just been doing that for a few years. And that's, again, how do we affect change at a larger scale, more meaningful change rather than everybody doing their own thing? And that's helped out because with partners and looking at that larger landscape, we've been able to, leverage more funding and have a greater impact. We're just getting really started on a lot of that, but we've seen some good things so far. And then we also have shared stewardships, agreements with all our states. And that's where, how can we help the state help with their mission, meet their goals with natural resources? And there's a lot of partners that sign on to those agreements. We have one in every state across the southern region.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember I went to school and got a degree in wildlife ecology conservation and spent a number of years as a biologist myself. And one of the things that always stuck with me was when I set foot in my the first day in one of my wildlife ecology management courses, an old professor was up there and he says, first thing you need to understand about wildlife management is primarily people management. And that always stuck with me because, you get into, you think you're kind of getting into this to be out in the field and dealing with the critters. But suddenly I figured out that, wow, if we're going to manage black bears in the national forest, man, we're dealing with people more than we are bears. And like the same goes for the white-tailed deer population, all the hunter check stations and chronic wasting disease sampling and all that stuff. And, you could just go on and on with pretty much any type of wildlife species. It really ties back into, it was a steep learning curve coming out of the natural, it's sort of on the natural resource side of things. And then I didn't really realize how much I was going to be, need to have those soft skills and those ability to connect with people and tell the stories of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And, working with people much more than working with wildlife. So it was a unique experience along the way, but it just reminds me of how much, how important partnerships are and strategic partnerships, whether they be with state, federal, local agencies in the public sector or in the private sector, especially private landowners. I deal with it a lot here in a small local city. We've got 30 some nature parks, and every single one of them is just any urban interface issue you can think of, we've got it. And but on a much broader scale, that's one of the things that I've noticed is that we're sort of having to shift how we approach conservation planning. Not necessarily with, everything within our boundaries is really important, but what's beyond our boundaries is becoming it's equally as important, and to pay attention to those things that are happening beyond our borders too.
But I had a similar experience. I remember I think it was a grad student when I was an undergraduate at West Virginia, and he said, you're all getting into this because you probably want to be in the woods. You don't want to be around people. And I check. You probably don't like writing. English wasn't my strong subject. Check. And you don't want to be stuck in an office. Yep. He said, well, guess what you're going to have to be working closely with people. You're going to have to be a good writer, and you're going to have to spend time in the office. But the time in the field will make all that worthwhile. And I think it was true to an extent, but the time with the people, made it worthwhile. Sure. I met some just fantastic people, and people who weren't necessarily in agreement with us, but I learned a lot from them, and it was valuable experience talking to folks that don't always agree with you.
For sure.
And it was always on my mind is how can we be responsive to someone's concerns without bending on our responsibility to do the right thing that needed to happen. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's interesting that you had that same kind of revelation.
Yeah, took a little while for it to sink in, but it was good. So along those lines, kind of closing things out today, what is one piece of advice that you would give someone starting out in your career field?
One piece of advice, well, one, just to start out with, people who are wanting to get started, just so they know, is we've been doing a lot of hiring. We've got a ton of turnover. So the door's been open. But I think the one piece of advice would be to keep that drive, to be driven. And what that means is get the foot in the door. When I came out with a master's in from Mississippi State, and I had people like, why are you starting as a forestry tech? Shouldn't you be starting as a biologist? It's foot in the door. You got to get your foot in the door. And then from there, learning. And that idea too is you got to go where the job is. So if you're driven, you're passionate about this, but it's hard if you pick where you want to work, then you might want to expand what you willing to do and who you want to do it for. And that's really three things I can maybe oversimplify things to is what you want to do, where you want to do it, and who you want to do it for. And if you limit those things, you better be prepared to expand the other. So when I came out, I was willing to, if somebody was offering a job anywhere in my field, I was going to it. And that was our attitude to get started. And then that drive continuing into work. Now your foot's in the door, you got started, that drive to learn, to be part of a team, work well with people, and not just learn about the craft, the science and the practical application of that on the land. That's huge. But then just like we've talked about all through this is learning about people, learning to listen, and
that could be a tough one.
Really hear people. I mean, really hear and spend time hearing is what, again, I mentioned the caring and the passion is when you listen, you'll hear the values that are people are expressing. And then how can you try to, again, meet their needs, but still do the management that's needed on the land. So all in all, having that drive, because it's going to go where you want to. So get involved, say yes to things. It's going to be, your drive, your attitude, what you make of it.
Great food for thought. Well, listen, we really appreciate your time on this. It's been really great hearing about your experiences. And again, thank you for taking us in another step beyond the fire.
Thank you, Cully. I really appreciate the time with you. Thank you.
Well, folks, it's my sincere hope that you're enjoying the show thus far. As you might have guessed by now, this show really is kind of a no frills, nothing fancy, just two people sitting down having a conversation and talking about stories of conservation from the field. I want to take a quick moment to mention my website, which is astepbeyondthefire.com. You can go there and check out and subscribe to your favorite podcast platforms there. You can find a number of them listed on the website. I've also got some merchandise for sale. What we're doing is we're offering some t-shirts, coffee mugs, and stickers for sale in order to promote some charitable giving, and that is to the Southern Fire Exchange. You can check out the Southern Fire Exchange at southernfireexchange.org. They're a great organization that provides fire science delivery on a variety of different platforms, but they really help people in the field understand the new latest goings on in the fire research side of things, and they help provide technical publication for people that are actively using fire, and they really promote a lot of great educational resources for folks that are out there doing this day to day. So I'd encourage you to take a look. If you so choose, we'll be donating 10% of profits to the Southern Fire Exchange on that platform. Again, I appreciate you taking a listen, and it's my hope that we continue this journey together in A Step Beyond the Fire podcast.